So we're in Nice, south of France at NGON DCI World. I'm here with Sterling. Good to see you, Sterling. How are you doing?
Good to see you again. Long time no talk.
Yeah, it's at least a couple of weeks.
We're on the circuit.
That's right. So, this is an optical event. It's May 2019. What are the big overall trends in the market, and are you hearing anything that backs up this trends or extends trends here in the Nice event?
Yeah, I think the trends are pretty in place. So this conference is interesting. It's more of a, it's not typically an announcement conference. It's kind of a get-together in Europe. It's Nice. So I'm not hearing a lot of new things, but that's not a surprise. But yeah, I mean, it's a continuation of a couple of trends. One of them, just everybody's trying to understand what to do as optical capacity reaches the Shannon limit, and what comes. There's a very optical conference topic. What comes after, where we are now, 800 gigabits. How do you pass the terabit mark, or do you is it the end of the road for coherent, and do we start to, need other technologies and techniques to increase capacity going forward? It's not an immediate issue, I don't think, but it is something that, over the next 5 years, the industry is going to have to sort out. So we saw this also at OFC.
Okay.
The other interesting thing that's part of this conference and was also part of OFC is the whole trend towards 400ZR, the OIF standard for data center interconnect. That really is this dream of IP over DWDM that we've been talking about for 15 years plus, is finally becoming a reality at 400 gig with this really innovative standard that can plug in and eliminate the transponders for DCI. So a lot of the vendors don't love that concept, but some of the big web scales have really just, they're starting to drive the market.
The vendors don't love it particularly, because there was a question here this morning: how do the vendors make money if this becomes just a very standardized product set? It's a very particular application, but it's a high volume one.
It is, and it's just indicative of a couple. One of them, it's indicative of how the web scales are really starting to drive things and become a significant just part of the spend and just the discussion that happens at these conferences, and also just the state of optics, where maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, vendors could have kind of separately but together said, we're not going to take part in this. It's not a moneymaker. Now it's so competitive and so mature as an industry that somebody's always going to bite at one of these things, and then everybody sort of has to jump in.
Yeah.
And then you figure out what's the business case kind of later, if there is one. That's right. So that's kind of where we are.
Business relationships rather than business case.
Yeah.
And then you're here, you're running a track on 5G transport. Has there been any particular development? The main thing I'm just hearing in the past 24 hours here is that there's so many moving parts, so many dynamics. On paper, the operators kind of need to do this, but also they need to get it cleared by the CFO, and two things don't match. Are you hearing anything new this year about what the starting points to enable transport networks of 5G might be?
Yeah, in one sense, things are becoming clear. I mean, there is some clarity towards the need for front haul, where front haul goes, kind of how you go about it. The big problem is there's also a lot of questions about the business case, for one, how you're going to invest. What I'm starting to see from the latest research we got back is, there's aggressive timelines for the operators and how to just get 5G out the door. A lot of it's just testing the radios in small scale. That's not the issue. It's these wide scale plans where the transport network needs to be in place. And the operators are saying 2021 to 23 is when that's going to happen.
Okay.
But the level of questions we're getting around the transport, especially from the operators, is telling me that that's not going to really be in place by 21 to 23. So you can get out the door, but then what is becoming a big question. And so these are, so the vendors kind of have at least some ideas that they're putting forward, but the operators, I still get a sense of a lot of confusion.
Yes.
And how are they going to, I just don't see how everything's going to add up on this, very optimistic timeline to wide scale.
Right. Okay. And then finally, in the optical market, as in many other parts of the telecom industry, the big, as you just said before, the big elephant in the room is what will ultimately, even short-term, medium-term, long-term, what will the impact of the global political climate be on market dynamics? You know, with Huawei under so much pressure and being locked out of more and more markets, probably some other companies who don't really want to talk about it are thinking, we can get some business here, we can leverage this opportunity.
It really is incredible. I mean, if you look at the sponsorship at this event, you've got, it's the first time I've seen this, but you know, that whatever the super diamondy names we have for these things, but it was Huawei and ZTE and FiberHome are the top 3 sponsors and everybody behind that. I mean, it shows how entrenched, you know, particularly Huawei, and to a much lesser degree the other two, but particularly Huawei is entrenched in the European market, and how much the European operators are tied to Huawei. And when you look at, you know, what's just happened for the past week with the U.S. basically being able to kind of, you know, pull a lever or sign a pen and really, you know, put a company out of business. When I mean, they did it with ZTE. It's they're, you know, headed that way with
probably
Huawei.
Try to put a company out of business, whether they're successful or not.
Well, you know, you look at how much Huawei relies on these U.S. companies across, you know, so many things. I mean, it's an optical product, but there's other things running the operating system, the software, and other chips that are on there. And then there's the whole rest of the business. But it's an incredible amount of power they have.
Absolutely.
And so whether it happens or not, you know, put that aside. The fact is, every operator in Europe is like, wow,
the uncertainty.
There's a situation that we can't control.
It's a FUDfest.
It is, and I am amazed, like you said, the other vendors, of course, you know, behind the scenes, they got to be jumping up and down, but you're not hearing boo about it at this conference.
I asked a question yesterday in the main conference hall about this topic, and everybody looked at their feet and nobody wanted to answer it.
I mean, I sort of understand, but I don't. But yeah, you would think there'd be more buzz around that.
Yeah. Nobody wants to put their foot in it and be quoted as saying this or that.
Right.
Apart from you.
Right. Oops. Is this on?
Yeah. Okay, Sterling. That's great. Thanks for catching up.
Yeah, thanks.